What is going on, everyone? Dan here, and today I am here with my review for the Arrowverse Crisis on Earth X crossover event. So this is an event that the CW/DC shows have every year. Last year, of course, we had the Invasion crossover, which I loved. This year was, of course, the Crisis on Earth X crossover, and instead of facing up against aliens, we went against a Nazi-oppressed Earth in the multiverse. So the story for this crossover is that Barry and Iris are, of course, getting married. However, it's all interrupted when Reichman from Earth X, an Earth where the Nazis won World War II and subsequently took over the whole Earth, come to our Earth and essentially wage war against it for personal means and matters. It's up to our friends, it's up to our heroes from Earth 1 to bind together and defeat the forces of Earth X and stop them from taking over our world. I went into this crossover with a lot of expectations because I really enjoyed last year's, although there were elements that I thought this crossover could definitely improve on. And while it does do so in some elements, and I would say it is overall a better crossover than last year's, there were a few negatives that did sadly drag it down for me at times. I'll start off by talking about the new characters that we got in these. I'll start off by talking about the new characters that we got in this crossover. We, of course, met the new heroes that we got in this crossover, which were, of course, Citizen Cold, a alternate version of Leonard Snart, and Ray Terrell, also known as the Ray. I'll start off with Citizen Cold. Of course, this is the Earth X version of Leonard Snart, and I absolutely loved him in this episode. I thought Wentworth Miller was amazing in this episode. It was just so good to see such a different version of Captain Cold, just being such a good guy, and I thought that was really, really fun. I really love having him back on. He's probably one of my favourite actors in the Arrowverse, just because he's so over the top, but he's just so good at doing it. I just love him for it. And then, of course, we had Ray Terrell, also known as the Ray, and I really enjoyed him as well. Of course, he's revealed that he's from Earth 1, but he moved over to Earth X. He's part of the Freedom Fighters, regime on Earth X, who are trying to stop the Reichman on that Earth. And I really liked him in this episode. I thought Russell Tovey did a very good job in the role. I very much liked his character, and I do hope we see him again. We know that we will be seeing Citizen Cold for a few episodes on Legends of Tomorrow, so I do hope that the Ray does show up in the Arrowverse, whether it be on Legends or The Flash. Now let's get on to the Earth X villains that we had. We, of course, had really three main villains and one villain who kind of showed up for the first two parts, but not really. So we'll start off with the three big bads, which were, of course, Dark Arrow, Overgirl, and the Reverse Flash. So Dark Arrow was, of course, the evil doppelganger of Oliver Queen, and I very much enjoyed him in this episode. I thought Stephen Amell was great as a evil version of Oliver. He was very, very good, very menacing, and I very much enjoyed his performance. Reverse Flash, of course, the Harrison Wells version played by Tom Cavanaugh. I thought he was amazing. Once again proved why Tom Cavanaugh is probably in my top three favorite actors in the Arrowverse. He's so fantastic, and I just love his take on Eobard Thawne. He's absolutely amazing, so menacing in this crossover, and I just really enjoyed him as a character. He was very, very good. I was a bit confused in terms of where this took place in his timeline because, of course, he was erased from existence at the end of Season 1, so I don't know how he still has Harrison Wells' face, but I guess that's something that I shouldn't really be trying to look into too much, or I'll probably end up confusing myself. And then, of course, we also had Overgirl, which is the evil doppelganger version of Kara Danvers, aka Supergirl. Now, she was probably my least favourite out of all of them, not because I found her terrible, but just because I feel like Melissa Benoist at times did kind of struggle to portray her character as a really, really, evil character. I just felt that at times she just wasn't able to convey much, evilness. It's weird to describe it, but I feel like Melissa Benoist is better suited to playing very, heroic and happy characters rather than somebody who's trying to be pure evil. I don't know, I just don't feel like this role suited her very much. But I will still admit that I enjoyed her character throughout. I just felt like she easily didn't feel as comfortable as, say, Stephen Amell in terms of like portraying an evil version of a character that was so familiar to. And then, of course, the last one, who I kind of omitted from this because he really wasn't that big of a part of it, was, of course, the Earth X version of Prometheus. Now, we speculated for some time who was under the hood. Would it be Josh Segura? Would it be somebody else? It turns out it was actually Colin Donnell as, of course, Tommy Merlin on Earth X. And I will admit this was a very sweet cameo. I really did enjoy it. The scene between Tommy and Oliver in Star Labs in the cell was fantastic. A very, very good scene. Great acting by the two of them. But, of course, after that conversation, he ends up taking a cyanide pill and obviously dies. I would have liked to have seen a bit more of Tommy, just because I really loved that scene. I felt it was a bit too short. But considering that Colin Donnell only appeared on set for like one day to film that scene and then had to fly back for Chicago Med, I can completely understand why. And I was just happy that we got to see him nevertheless. Now we're going to talk about the hero characters and the which ones that stood out to me. And for me personally, there were three characters that really stood out in this crossover. The first one was, of course, Mick. I mean, I love Mick, Rory, aka Heatwave. He's probably my favourite Legends of Tomorrow character, and he featured quite prominently in this crossover, and I really enjoyed him, especially in that first episode. There were so many funny moments with him in. My favourite one has got to be the part where he's actually asleep during Barry and Iris's wedding. That was fantastic. I was crying in laughter. That was so funny. I, of course, have also put down here Killer Frost. I really enjoyed her as well, Killer Frost, Caitlin. I thought she was very good in the crossover as well, the little dynamic that she had with Martin Stein, I thought was very, very good. I very much enjoyed her in this crossover, and as Killer Frost, she definitely had a few badass moments, especially the ice slide that she created in the final battle, and the way that she was just wrecking dudes in that church fight was fantastic. I've also put down here Martin, Stein, and Jax. I really enjoyed them in this episode. I thought they got a lot of character development, and I really enjoyed them in this episode, especially with what happens later in the episode. This kid did kind of make sense, but I really enjoyed it nevertheless. And I just found them to be very good in this episode. I thought Victor Garber and Franz Dramer gave really good performances in this episode, probably the best performances they have ever given in the Arrowverse. Now, of course, we all come to this crossover for action, and this crossover did not disappoint. There was a lot of action sequences in this crossover. I mean, you had the church fight in episode 1, which was fantastic. You also had a fight scene in episode 2, at the end, where it was the main heroes versus the Earth X Reichman. That one was probably my least favourite out of the 4 big fights, only because I feel like it was not as very well choreographed at times, which is surprising considering it was an Arrow episode. But oh well, I still enjoyed it nevertheless. You of course had the Escape from Earth X fight in episode 3. I really enjoyed that, and then episode 4 with the finale fight, probably the best fight ever on the Arrowverse. Like in terms of a group fight, I thought it was even better than the Dominator fight at the end of last year's crossover. It was just really cool to see, and I very much enjoyed the action here and how they filmed it, and just the choreography for the most part was very good. And I just in general really enjoyed it, and I found myself constantly thrilled with what was shown on screen. And I also have to commend the way that they structured this crossover as well. They changed it up from previous crossovers, because last year we only had 3 episodes, and every episode of the crossover essentially felt like it was very much part of the show that it was airing on. For example, the Flash part of the crossover felt like a Flash episode, the Arrow part felt like an Arrow episode, and the Legends part felt like a Legend episode. This year they changed that to essentially make it feel like one big, long 2.5-hour film, and I felt like this really did work in favor of the crossover. It made everything feel so connected. It didn't feel like I was disjointed with all these different, themes and just tones, because of course of the fact that they were trying to stick to the episode's tone for what the show it's on. It didn't feel too jarring going from episode to episode tone-wise, and I really enjoyed that, and I thought just the way that they structured it in general, the fact that they didn't rush into anything, they took their time with it, with the fact that they had an extra episode, unlike last year, to further develop the premise and the characters. I thought they did a far better job with that, and I must say it was very, very well done. And then lastly, I've of course got on here is Martin Stein's death. We knew that a character would be dying in this crossover, and Victor Garber we already knew was leaving Legends of Tomorrow, so he was the most likely candidate. And I have to say, they did an amazing job pulling off Martin Stein's death. It was very emotional. I will admit I teared up quite a lot during his death scene, and when Jax has to go to his family and tell them that that Martin's dead, and his funeral as well. It was so well done. Franz Dramer and Victor Garber, fantastic in this episode. Fantastic. Just so much character development and just great moments between the two. I would honestly rank this death alongside Laura Lance's and Barry's mum in the Arrowverse in terms of like the most upsetting deaths, because it was just so well done. And I will congratulate the writing on that part. They did a phenomenal job with those characters. Now, I do have some issues to point out with this crossover. The first one being that I felt like there wasn't enough Legends characters, prominent throughout the crossover. I mean, we only got Nate, Amaya, and Zari in the last episode, which I felt like was a bit of a shame. I really wanted to see more of them in this crossover. And the same with Ray as well. Ray actually wasn't in it until the last episode, which I was very disappointed by. We also had no Black Siren, which I was very surprised by, considering, the dynamic that she could have with Sarah. I was very disappointed by that. No Martian Manhunter either, which I found very disappointing. And no Ralph Dibny. They never explain what happened to Ralph whatsoever. No mention to him at all. And then we also had, Wally, who was essentially sidelined the whole episode. I don't know what the fuck happened to him, but he was gone. That didn't make a lot of sense, because, he was in the first episode, had a cool moment, and then just ended up as a bodyguard for Cecile and Joe, which made no sense whatsoever. And the last issue is really Olicity. I didn't like it in this episode. I thought the wedding at the end felt so forced. The fact that they jumped into Barry and Iris's wedding felt so rude, in my opinion. I just didn't like it at all. And I felt like all of the Olicity segments were so forced. I'm really worried for Arrow now going forward because of just the fact that they're married. And I'm worried that now this is going to take too much focus on the show. I don't want to talk about it loads because everybody knows my opinion on Olicity. If you watch my channel, I don't like it. And I just really was disappointed with the direction they went with their characters. And I'm just going to put this right here right now because me and Declan McKinney both ship this. But, Oliver's going ahead marrying Felicity. Kara was right there the whole time. We saw the fact that the Dark Archer and Overgirl, of course, were in a relationship. And I remember just sitting there and I was like, I didn't realize I wanted this until now. Hashtag Super Arrow. Let's get this trending, people. We need to get this relationship canon. This needs to happen ASAP because I can guarantee you it is better than whatever shit Olicity will come up with. So that is my basic thoughts for the Crisis on Earth X crossover. If I had to give it a score, which I probably wouldn't do because, you have to factor in 4 episodes here. But in terms of a score, I would probably give the crossover something along the lines of probably an 8.5 to a 9. Somewhere around that mark, to be honest. Like I said, there was a lot I really liked about the crossover. I liked the Earth X concept. I liked the structure of the crossover. The action was great. Some of the characters were really, really good. But there were some nitpicks and drawbacks that stopped me from thinking that it was amazing. I think this crossover is by far better than Justice League. Just in the way it was structured and the way it was paced, I thought it was far, far better. And I really, really enjoyed this crossover. I'm definitely interested in how they're going to top this next year, just because of how good this was. So yeah, I really enjoyed this crossover. Really excited for it. Maybe not so much returning to Arrow, but in general, what they pulled off here I thought was fantastic. So that is my opinions on the Crisis on Earth X crossover. Of course, let me know in the comment section down below what you thought about this crossover. Did you love it like me, or were you a bit disappointed? I know there's some people out there who didn't like it as much, so if that is the case, let me know in the comment section down below. And with that being said, I'd like to thank you all very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you again next time.